Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Can I get a hand in the back if you can hear me? Thumbs up. All right. Good morning, everyone. Ani Bojo, Giweden Nagabo Kwe Indigenous, Ganujnakani Ninonjaba. My name is Whitney Gravel, and I am the president of Bay Mills Indian Community. First, I wanted to say Chi Miigwech and thank you for the honor of being your MC today. And I also want to say Chi Miigwech to Bawa Ting, or the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, for hosting us. It's only by being gathered here today that we were able to come together safely so that we can celebrate the announcing of our missing and murdered Indigenous persons tribal community response plans. As you all know, the state of Michigan has 12 federally recognized tribes that include Bay Mills and Sault Ste. Marie tribe, who have lived upon this land since time immemorial. We make up a small percentage of the Michigan population, yet Native women continue to suffer disproportional rates of domestic violence, murder, stalking, rape, sexual assault. We have all heard these statistics. 84% of Native women have experienced some form of violence in their lifetime. More than 55% have experienced physical or sexual violence by their intimate partners, and more than 10% have experienced it in the past year. These are extremely heavy statistics that have burdened our people and burdened our women within our communities. In addition, Native women face rates of murder that are 10 times higher than the national average, and murder is the third leading cause of death for Native women. Of these statistics, 40% of Native women victims are also victims of human sex trafficking, even though we only make up 10% of the overall population in the United States. To bring all of that into perspective, if you know a Native woman or you know a Native woman and her family, you also know someone who has survived violence in their lifetime, whether it be domestic, physical, or sexual. Yet despite these numbers, the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and people continues to go largely ignored by the general public. It is only voiced by our tribal nations where we bring awareness, not only to these statistics, but also to the harm that is being contributed to our Native women and their families within our communities. This is partially due to the fact that the history of violence and murder against Native women and people is convoluted by the complex jurisdictional schemes that exist for tribal nations in the United States. For more than 40 years, tribal nations have been denied the ability to prosecute non-Indian perpetrators, and a lack of resources impedes investigation from the federal government, which prevents tribal nations from providing Native women the protection and help that they deserve. For more than 4 years, the United States Congress has not reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, which aids and expands tribal court resources to respond to these types of crimes. That's why we came here today in partnership with the Department of Justice to create our own community action plans so that we can empower ourselves to respond to these types of crimes. We can empower other organizations to work together with us so that we can protect our Native women. This is something that cannot continue any longer. Not only do we need to empower our tribal nations with the ability and resources that allow our law enforcement officers and our tribal governments to adequately investigate, prosecute, and punish the types of crimes committed against Native women, we also need to empower our people so that these types of cases do not continue to go unresolved or unaddressed, so that our people can have some type of healing when they lose a loved one, whether they go missing or they are murdered. We cannot allow these types of cases to continue to go unresolved, unsolved, and unaddressed, leaving our families and our communities devastated with a piece of themselves missing. Together, as we have come here today, we must raise our voices and call for justice for our Native women and girls. So together we get to say to the state of Michigan, to the United States in partnership, that to the public, the lives of Native women, girls, Two-Spirit, and Indigenous people are important. That's why we're here today. That's why you were invited, and that's why we welcome the ceremonies and the release of these response plans. These women, these girls, they are our future. They are sacred. We need them to continue to live as a people and to continue to survive as a tribal nation. And together today we stand ready to protect them. When we have a missing or murdered Indigenous woman in our community, we have already failed at addressing the numerous acts of violence that have led to that horrific end. So today I am grateful for our law enforcement officials, our victim services coordinators, our communication specialists, and numerous departments within our tribal government for their work, not only in Bay Mills Indian community, but also in the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. It is through your work, your planning, your collaboration, and your organizing that today we can release these plans that protect our Indigenous people. It is by gathering like we are here today, listening, learning, sharing, collaborating, problem solving, and creating, that we can finally heal the wounds of intergenerational violence that have plagued our women and our people for centuries. Today we move forward, embracing each other in healing, and we recognize that our grandmothers, our mothers, our sisters, our friends, our aunties, our two spirits, and our kwewag, so that the injustices that they have suffered will be corrected for the future. And today we take that narrative into our hands to provide them protection and justice for many years to come. So thank you, and we will be opening the ceremony with a prayer and a song from Jeanette White and Cecil Pavlov. Miigwech, Cecil, and Jeanette, thank you for that song and starting us off in a good way. Next up, we have a shawl presentation and ceremony by the Uniting Three Fires Against Violence, which will be narrated by Jamie Moran.
Ani buju, gegek kwayadishnakas nimki dodam bawating indunjaba. My English name is Jamie Moran, and I'm the program director for the Sioux Tribes Victim Service Program, the Advocacy Resource Center. Before we move any further in today's events agenda, we ask that you all please take a moment to reflect and remember how violence has in the past and continues today to impact our nation, our state, our community, our families, and ourselves. It is through each of these shawls presented before you today that we collectively acknowledge those that have and those that continue to be negatively impacted by violence. Today, we remember our children. From the eastern direction, the direction that represents all that is new. We remember our children who have suffered from abuse and neglect and are exposed to violence within their homes, online, in their schools, and in their communities. Our children, they are now not only threatened with face-to-face violence, but are being captured online and through technology. They are being manipulated, kidnapped, and sex trafficked. Our children, the innocent ones, gifts from the Creator. Today we remember our children. Today we collectively commit to protect our children from harm, as they are our future. Today we remember our women from the southern direction, the direction that represents understanding. We remember the women survivors, survivors of the physical violence which may be seen, survivors of power and control which most times is invisible. Women, the backbones of our families, the givers of life. We honor those women survivors that have made the difficult decision to raise their voices and share their stories. We offer respect and support to those women that have chosen not to. Today, we remember our women. Today, we collectively commit to protect our women from harm. We commit to believing survivors, and we commit to ending victim blaming. Today, we remember our men. From the western direction, the direction that represents change. We remember that our men are also victims of violence, warriors, providers, protectors, strong and resilient. Today, we acknowledge that system and community responses to end violence must include our men. Today, we remember our men. Today, we collectively commit to protect our men from harm, and we commit to ensuring equality in our responses to violence committed against all genders. We will no longer promote gender stereotypes. Today, we remember our elders. From the northern direction, the direction that represents positivity. We remember our elders, the wisdom keepers of the past. Our elders, the legacy of future generations. We remember our elders who never realized how strong they were until they chose to forgive those who caused them harm and were never sorry. Today, we remember our elders. Today, we collectively commit to protect our elders in honor of all that they have sacrificed for the sake of our people and for the sake of our next 7 generations. Today, we remember our LGBTQ two-spirited, the gift keepers of both male and female spirits. We remember that they are oftentimes abandoned and ignored. We remember our LGBTQ two-spirited who encounter violence for nothing more than who they love. Today, we remember and collectively commit to protect our LGBTQ two-spirited, and we commit to stand beside them in unity and with unconditional acceptance. And lastly, today we remember the empty chair. We remember the missing and the murdered. We remember those that have passed from this earth too soon. We remember those that remain unfound and pray for their safe return. We remember those who were sent to the Indian residential schools and never returned. And we remember those that did return, but were never the same. Today, we commit to stand together and collectively demand that no more communities experience the loss of their people. Each and every one of us present in this room today is a single thread that forms these community shawls, a single thread that holds the power to make a difference. Until our community is free from all violence, this chair will remain empty. And we must continue to weave our collective threads of support every second of every minute of every day. Help one another. Believe survivors. Be the change. In closing, I just want to say miigwech and thank you for joining us today in this momentous occasion. Oho.
Uju, wapishka paneshi kwainin mong ni no dam, jekaning donjba. I've been given tobacco to come up and share a little bit about what Jeanette's doing here. So she was given tobacco along with us to help the planning committee here do something in honor and recognition of all the loved ones that have been taken from us too soon. Many have not returned. And so what we are doing is a ceremony to cleanse the spirit of those that have gone on with cedar. And she's made a smudge. And so as those shawls are smudged, we know that the spirit of those that have passed are also being purified at this time from all violence and negativity that was perpetrated upon them. For those that haven't returned yet, that are still missing, we offer a prayer for their safe return. But if in fact they have also walked on, their spirit will too be purified. And so with this prayer, we're asking that from now on, when these shawls are hung, wherever they're going to be put, either by the ones that are currently hanging in the trees south of here, or wherever they end up being displayed, they're going to offer a symbol of hope and renewal, because for too long these voices have gone unheard. And we now know that there's going to be those that are going to be working to prevent and stop this atrocity upon our people. So for all those children and women, those men and elders, and those of our LGBTQ two-spirited communities, and for those that are missing, we ask a blessing upon them, and they will be hung as a symbol of hope that now something's being done and their voices are heard, and they can rest in peace. Miigwech.
Miigwech to Kathy and Jeanette, as well as the Uniting Three Fires Against Violence for this shawl ceremony and for this representation of why we are all here today. Next up, we have a special video from the Honorable Deb Haaland, Secretary of the Department of Interior. She is a member and citizen of the Pueblo of Laguna and made history when she became the first Native American to serve as Cabinet Secretary. Not only in Congress did Secretary Haaland focus on missing and murdered Indigenous women, but during her short time already at the Department of Interior, she has recommitted to our Indigenous women, our people, our men, our two spirits, and has helped create the Missing and Murdered Unit within the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Justice Services to provide leadership and direction for cross-departmental and interagency work involving missing and murdered American Indians, Alaskan Natives. Now presenting a video from Secretary Deb Haaland.
Hello, Tribal Council members, community organizers, and honored guests. Secretary Deb Haaland here, coming to you from the ancestral homelands of the Tewa and Tanoan people. Huge thanks to Sault Ste. Tribe Chair Aaron Payment and Bay Mills President Whitney Gravel for hosting this important event to highlight federal, state, tribal, and local partnerships to address the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis. I'm proud to see Governor Whitmer on the list of speakers as a testament to an all levels of government approach to this issue. The plans you've been discussing today will have an impact for generations to come and can help families find their loved ones, solve the cases, and prevent our people from going missing without a trace. The missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis is an issue that I hold close to my heart and have made a priority even before I was elected to serve in Congress. I attended a Senate committee hearing on Savannah's Act in 2018, right after I was elected. A young woman shared a story about her lost loved one. They reported her sister missing and mentioned to authorities that her sweater was on the side of the road, with hopes that it would lead to answers. Weeks later, the sweater was still there, and the family began to search for their lost loved one. Less than a year later, we held our own hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee to hear testimony from the families, activists, and leaders. They shared stories that had a lasting impact on me and on members of the committee. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their communities. But the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis is one that Native communities have faced since the dawn of colonization. For too long, this issue has been swept under the rug with a lack of urgency, attention, and funding. I know what it's like to worry for my mother, my sisters, my child, and my relatives, because we are at an increased risk of disappearing without warning. Many times cases go unsolved and unaddressed, leaving families and communities devastated. But I believe we're at an inflection point. We have a president and a government that is prioritizing this issue, and we can't turn back. President Biden's proclamation recognizing May 5th as Missing and Murdered American Indian and Alaska Native Awareness Day is a vital part of building awareness and combating the crisis. In Congress, I led the effort to pass the Not Invisible Act and co-led the passage of Savannah's Act. Together, these proposals take steps to address the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples epidemic by closing gaps in information sharing and data collection and empowering Interior to draw on the experience and expertise of those on the front lines. And now, in partnership with the Justice and Health and Human Services departments and with extensive engagement with tribes and stakeholders, Interior is determined to marshal our resources to implement these laws. To implement the Not Invisible Act, we established a joint commission led by the Departments of Interior and Justice on reducing violent crime against American Indians and Alaska Natives. The commission will be composed of federal and non-federal members who represent diverse experiences, backgrounds, and geography, will provide a balanced points of view, and hold hearings, take testimony, and receive evidence to develop recommendations for the federal government to combat violent crime against Indians and within Indian lands. We're also putting the full weight of our federal government in a cross-departmental missing and murdered unit. The unit will provide the resources and leadership to prioritize unsolved cases and coordinate resources to hold perpetrators accountable, keep our communities safe, and provide closure for families. These efforts will be made more effective by our work to cooperate with Canada and Mexico and other countries, because we know that human trafficking is part of the problem. The missing and murdered Indigenous peoples crisis is centuries in the making and will take a focused effort and time to unravel the many threads that contribute to the alarming rates of cases. I'm grateful for the communities and the organizers who rang the alarm and gave a voice to the missing. My heart goes out to the families whose loved ones have disappeared. We'll keep working together until our loved ones stop going missing without a trace. Thank you all so much.
Miigwech to Secretary Deb Haaland for being able to send us a video message. Regrettably, she could not join us today, but as she identified in her speech, we are really unifying all branches of government within the United States, federal, state, and tribal, to address the issue of missing and murdered women. Next up, we would like to welcome Andrew Burge, United States Attorney for the Western District of Michigan. He was appointed by the federal court in 2018 after assuming the duties of the U.S. Attorney on an interim and acting basis in early 2017. Mr. Burge has been with the office for over 20 years, and importantly, in his capacity as U.S. Attorney, has served on Native American issues subcommittees of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, which reports on and evaluates issues and policies for Department of Justice leadership. Mr. Burge began his legal career as a law clerk to the late Chief U.S. District Court Judge Richard Ensland in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and prior to joining the U.S. Attorney's Office, he was in private practice. Mr. Burge obtained a law degree from Columbia University School of Law and his Bachelor of Arts degree from Carleton College. Now presenting Andrew Burge.
Thank you, President Gravel. I'm honored to be here. And this is one of those times where I in particular appreciate the opportunity to share in and celebrate and recognize a significant accomplishment. And make no mistake, the development of these tribal community response plans is a significant accomplishment. Before these efforts began, there was no such thing as a community response plan for any community, anywhere. This is certainly a tribal accomplishment as well. As much as we have talked about the national scope and the multi-jurisdictional problem that Michigan murdered Indigenous persons cases present, this case, we have the tribes taking the lead. And I think it's worth pointing out that's part of a trend. The trend of tribal members and communities taking the lead, taking leadership roles on the significant challenges of our day. Consider, for example, Secretary Howland, or perhaps the tremendous success rate tribal communities have had in rolling out vaccines for the members of their communities who want one. So much so that we have seen around the country, tribal communities even opening their doors to non-members who need a vaccine. So too, with tribal businesses and tribal communities' ability to figure out early on how to successfully keep tribal businesses open safely in the course of a pandemic to keep the economies going. As for the challenges of MMIP, here we have the Sault Ste. Marie tribe and the Bay Mills Indian community taking the lead, setting forth not only how tribal law enforcement and victim services will respond to a report, and coordinate with other law enforcement agencies. But in the course of that, setting forth a model that other communities can follow, tribal and non-tribal alike. I was pleased in my capacity as U.S. Attorney to be able to bring in some resources and reference materials for this effort. I particularly want to thank Joel Postma, who I was able to bring on board as a coordinator for this effort. Because never again should we be unable to really answer how many are missing, unable to say for sure that law enforcement is doing or has done everything it should be doing, or unable to at least provide some answers to families who need them. So I pledge that my office and the Department of Justice will always endeavor to work with law enforcement, tribal law enforcement, and tribal communities to address, in particular, violent crime in tribal areas. But I want to particularly thank the committees who put together these tribal community response plans. I look forward, as a law enforcement officer, to seeing them implemented and shared. So congratulations and thank you. I look forward to hearing more about them today.
Next up, we have a video message from Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who is a lifelong Michigander focused on getting things done and that will make a difference in people's lives. Not only is Governor Whitmer an attorney, an educator, a former prosecutor, state representative, and senator, most importantly, Governor Gretchen Whitmer is a mom. And it is through that love in being a mother that Governor Gretchen Whitmer understands our loss of our loved ones, our loss of our missing and murdered Indigenous women. And she supports our tribal nations as we address this epidemic. On May 5th, 2021, the state of Michigan declared Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Day as a day of acknowledgement and awareness for state government. In addition, under Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the Michigan Women's Commission has been helping tribal nations end violence against women altogether. And so now we present remarks from Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Hello, it's Governor Gretchen Whitmer. We face an ongoing human rights crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women and persons in our country. Today, let's discuss what we can do to help keep them safe. The DOJ's Lady Justice Initiative, Savannah's Act, and Not Invisible Act, and the impending reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act, with specific provisions for Indian country, are steps in the right direction, but they're not enough to tackle this crisis. The solution lies in us coming together today. By coordinating efforts at the local, state, and tribal levels, we can help prevent abductions in the first place and expedite recovery efforts through mutual aid, training, and evidence-based interventions. This collaborative effort to establish MMIP protocols is a great start. Finally, I want to express my excitement for solutions on the horizon, thanks to the leadership of our first Native American cabinet member, Deb Haaland, a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe. Secretary Haaland's perspective is invaluable, and her commitment to addressing this crisis head-on is inspiring. It'll save lives. I wish I could be there in person to enjoy the ceremonies with you, and I look forward to working together.
We gave you a sneak peek, but next up, we also have a video message from Attorney General Dana Nessel. A former criminal prosecutor and civil rights attorney, Dana Nessel was sworn in as Michigan's 54th Attorney General on January 1st, 2019. Her core initiatives have been fashioned in the image of her promise to Michigan residents to give the Department of Attorney General back to the people that it serves. As the state's chief law enforcement officer, Attorney General Nessel works closely to drop the rise of crimes against the state's most vulnerable populations, like we are addressing here today. And she has created a conviction integrity unit to investigate claims of innocence so that even when we prosecute the state's most heinous crimes, we can ensure the public's trust in our criminal justice system. A graduate of the University of Michigan and Wayne State University Law School, Attorney General Dana Nessel lives in Southwest Michigan with her wife and her twin sons, and supports us here today on this initiative. Now presenting Attorney General Dana Nessel.
Hello, tribal leaders and friends. I'm so happy to share some sentiments regarding our most vulnerable victims, our Indigenous women, children, and other tribal victims. Because of the maze of jurisdictional issues, it can be especially challenging to address this important social justice matter. So thank you for inviting me to join you today in marking this momentous occasion where two tribal nations and the federal government joined forces to do the arduous work in drafting a protocol that may just save lives through timely and thoughtful intervention. First, let me say that I recognize the simple value of reaching out and collaborating across entities to ensure there are no holes in jurisdiction. After all law enforcement, prosecutors, judges, and victims advocates want to ensure justice for all residents. Early in my term as Attorney General, I was invited to speak to Michigan's elected chairs, presidents, chiefs, and Ojima. Prior to this session, I researched justice issues like the impact tribes like Major Crimes Act, Tribal Law and Order Act, and Violence Against Women Act, and the shortcomings of each. And I also took the time to look at the tribal court systems of the 12 sovereign tribal nations in Michigan. During my initial meeting with all 12 tribes at the United Tribes of Michigan, I pledged to become more knowledgeable on these issues. At the urging of tribal leaders, I committed to establishing an initial and then regular justice system review, similar to the U.S. Attorney's Office annual review with all 12 tribes, to help build capacity at the state level and to ensure there are no holes in jurisdiction that leave opportunities for exploitation by perpetrators. We held our first session during the pandemic with a virtual conference, and I look forward to our continued efforts. Now, let me turn to the broader crisis that brings us here today in search of solutions. In the United States, violence against American Indian, Alaska Native women has reached devastating levels on tribal lands and in Alaska Native villages. From the National Institute of Justice research report released in May 2016, we learned that more than 4 in 5 Native women, or 84.3%, have experienced violence in their lifetimes. More than half of Native women, 56.1%, have experienced sexual violence in their lifetimes. More than half, 55.6%, have experienced physical violence by intimate partners in their lifetimes. Almost half, 48.8%, have been stalked in their lifetimes. Native women are 1.7 times more likely than white women to experience violence. Native women were almost twice as likely to experience rape as non-Hispanic white women, 34.1% versus 17.9% over the course of a lifetime. Native women also face murder rates more than 10 times the national average in some counties. As I recite these statistics, what's even more disturbing is that this data is simply what we know based on reporting. However, actual data of just how many Native women go missing or are relegated as invisible in many judicial systems with a Jane Doe designation is truly alarming. One salient point made by my friend Dr. Erin Payment during our first Tribal Justice Forum was the lack of accurate data related to the crisis of violence against Native women and those who are missing and murdered. This is why the Savannahs Act and the Not Invisible Act and reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act with key provisions for tribes is so crucial. Issues of race and vital statistics are already complex. Add to this issues of historical and intergenerational trauma, forced assimilation, and federal Indian policy, and resulting American Indian identity issues, and self-identification, especially if due care is not taken to ask the victim if she's a citizen of a federally recognized tribe, and you can imagine the spurious results of existing data collection methods. This is a difficult challenge in determining jurisdiction, but also in bringing to bear critical victim services that tribal nations are eager to provide to their citizens. The protocol, created through this pilot project, and the anticipated results of facilitated cooperation with all levels of judicial systems will undoubtedly result in enhanced services and reform. I am personally excited to see a shift in leadership under the nation's first American Indian cabinet member, Secretary Deb Haaland. I anticipate greater resources to aid in conducting local tabletop exercises to build even greater capacity and evidence-based decision-making, and to recommit across jurisdictions to address this crisis. So thank you for inviting me to participate in today's event. You have an advocate in the Michigan Attorney General's office and a commitment to lead in a new direction.
Next up, we also have a video message from Senator Gary Peters, who has been honored to represent the state of Michigan in the United States Senate since 2015. In the 117th Congress, Gary is the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, which oversees the Department of Homeland Security and is the Senate's top oversight committee. He also serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee. He has focused on uniting our communities by fighting the things that we all agree upon, which includes joining us here today to support tribal nations in raising awareness on missing and murdered Indigenous women.
Hello, this is U.S. Senator Gary Peters, and thank you to President Whitney Gravel, Chairman Erin Payment, tribal leaders, U.S. Attorney Burge, and everyone attending this important event. We come together to discuss the missing and murdered Indigenous persons crisis, a crisis that we all know has reached devastating levels. As your senator and chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, I recognize the additional challenges that the northern and southern borders pose to ensuring federal cooperation and partnership with our allies to best respond to reports of missing person. We all know the importance of partnerships between the federal and state governments, law enforcement agency, as well as tribes to work together to confront the epidemic of missing Indigenous persons. Here in Michigan, the Bay Mills and Sioux tribes are taking part in a pilot program to establish strong, common sense protocols for developing plans to respond to emergent cases of missing or murdered Indigenous persons. I know that under the leadership of Secretary Haaland, who I was proud to help confirm as our nation's first American Indian Cabinet Secretary, combating this crisis will be a top priority. While we're making some progress, I think we can all agree that the challenges that remain, including ensuring there is a central system to track cases involving murdered and missing Indigenous persons, and to establish standards for data collection. This is critical to fully engage tribal sovereigns in the search, recovery, and victim services for their citizens. I'm committed to continue working with you, and I want to again recognize the important work all of you are doing that will not only help your tribal communities, but others across our state and our country. Thank you again for all that you do.
Although they could not join us here today, we do want to extend a huge thank you to Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Secretary Deb Haaland, Senator Gary Peters, Attorney General Dana Nessel for their support as we release and announce our tribal community response plans on missing and murdered Indigenous women. We can demonstrate that not only tribal nations, but the state and federal government are behind our backs and are walking hand in hand with us as we empower our tribal nations to address these issues. Next up, we have introduction of our Chief of Police by Chairperson Aaron Paymont, who serves as chairperson of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. He has served not only as tribal council member, vice chairperson, but has also worked in higher education directly serving fellow Native Americans. For over 20 years, Chairperson Paymont has provided annual training on tribal sovereignty and government-to-government relations to future Michigan legislatures through the Michigan Political Leadership Program. Now presenting Chairperson Aaron Paymont.
Ani, bonjour. Cool. I get to see what this thing is. I was wondering. Looks like something from Star Wars. Ni bonjour, biwak jiganishnakas, makwa magizi and dodam, bawating and donjaba, nashnabe, ojibwe odawa, otawatami and dao. I'm Chairperson Aaron Paymont. When I do my introduction, I always recognize all of my blood, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Otawatami of all of the 3 fires, because I'm very proud of it. I also want to say, in case anybody who sees this, yesterday we lifted our mask order. And so you see some people that still have masks on, but most of the people in the room don't. And the reason is because we lifted our order yesterday because we are almost at the end of this horrible pandemic. So I want to recognize my council members that are here first. We have from Unit 1, DJ Hoffman, Austin Lowe's, Betty Fraheit, Kim Gravel, I saw Kim, and also Mike McCurchie. From Unit 2, we have Lana Cosley and Catherine Hollowell. Unit 3, we have Keith Massaway and Bridget Sorensen. And I think that's it for our council today. So I also want to thank U.S. Attorney Andrew Burge. We worked together before you became U.S. Attorney, so I was very excited that you became our U.S. Attorney. And bringing Joel on. Joel is a friend of the tribe and also a community member from this community, so it was significant and maybe a little contrived that you picked this community, but we will take it, right? But the justification for it, obviously, is because we're right on the border. And it does affect 2 tribes, and it was a good pilot. When we started this process, we wanted to develop a pilot that would be able to be modeled by other tribes. And so when Joel had asked us if we would be interested, I said yes, but it's with the intent that we can do something that will then be useful for the other tribes in Michigan, and then also all tribes. And so we aren't the first to announce the protocol. There was the Montana already announced, but we believe our program is probably the most comprehensive so far. And so we took a lot of effort to make sure that we had keynote speakers and really do a good program on this and get commitments. If you saw through all of the different speeches by Secretary Haaland, by our governor, by our Attorney General, the Attorney General's speech was so chock full of detail and commitment to data collection. One of the very important things is data collection because the victims of violence matter. It doesn't matter what might have led them to the situation that put them at risk, but they matter. And I attended a session recently that Interior held on victims, and it was very difficult it was a 4-hour session. It was very difficult to listen through, but it's a matter of saying their name and not forgetting them. They're not invisible. They're real, living, breathing people that somebody's sister or auntie or grandmother or brother or somebody who's transitioning. And they deserve our love and our support, not our judgment. That's unimportant, the judgment part. And the judgment part actually gets in the way. It gets in the way of law enforcement from doing a good objective investigation. And it's a bias. And so, so the fact that we were able to come together to develop this between the Sioux tribe and the Bay Mills tribe, and then to be able to build capacity, because we know this is just the beginning. Now that we've developed the protocol, we are seeking dollars, federal dollars, to implement this protocol. And that means pulling together local law enforcement and at all levels so that we can work through biases, that we can use evidence-based decision-making to attack this issue, so that we can start collecting data so that we actually know which tribe, rather than an Indian victim. We actually want to know the name of the tribe, and then to be able to share that information with our respective tribal nations. We already do it with ICWA, and I'm not saying it's perfect with ICWA, but the requirement to disclose and notify a tribe is already happening with ICWA. I want the same thing for our victims. If there's a victim, no matter where, if it's in California, Hawaii, Alaska, if it's one of our citizens, we deserve to know, because we will then bring resources to bear for that tribal victim. And so this is our first step in that direction. I want to thank all of the speakers who already talked, but I also want to thank our team, our Sioux Tribe team and our Bay Mills team that labored through this. And I can tell you, we've been working at this for about 6 months. It was a lot of work to articulate out, to make sure all the voices were heard, and to make sure that it's incorporated in our document. And I want to give special recognition. No, I better not do it because I think Bob's going to do it. So, but I just want to recognize everybody for the effort that they put into drafting this document. I also want to give a special recognition. He's probably watching it on video. He's in the process of becoming our Assistant Secretary, Brian Newland, who at the time was chairperson or president of Bay Mills when we started this process. And he is 100% committed to this because of the ethical rules and stuff like that with getting confirmed. We couldn't put him on the agenda, but I just want to recognize his efforts on this project, but also my excitement of having one of our Anishinaabe be the assistant secretary, and that's impending. It's got to be done all appropriately and all of that, but just how proud we are in Michigan of Brian Newland and his impending appointment. I'll say it that way. Let's hear it. So one last thing before I do our introductions of our chiefs. I do want to recognize our BIA partners that are here, Patty Olby and also Jason Oberly. Your names are kind of almost the same. But Patty is the person who helps us to get through all of the budget stuff. So she is invaluable. So I thank you for coming, Patty. I also want to recognize our intertribal presence today. We have the chairwoman of the Little Traverse Bay Band, Regina Gasco-Bentley. We also have I call her my Potawatomi sister, Phyllis Davis from Gun Lake. And then Ogamelli, Ogama Romanelli, and I gave him the nickname Ogamelli. And Pokagon's got some representatives here. Council Wisa, and just wave your hands, everybody from Pokagon. Did I miss any tribes that are here? GTB or any of the other tribes that I missed? Okay, good. So with that, I want to bring up our chiefs, the Bay Mills chief and the Sioux Tribe chief, Rob Marchant and Ron Carrick. They're going to do a walkthrough of the protocol. You're going to be the first that's trained on this protocol, and we do have a test at the end.
All right, that's going to be a hard act to follow for sure. Good morning, everybody. For those that don't know me, my name is Robert Marchant, and I'm the Chief of Police for the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians. So welcome, everybody. Before we get into it, I wanted to start by recognizing a few people before we begin. First and foremost, Mr. Joel Postman, the center row, if you could stand up, please. I've known this gentleman for many years, so when he made the call to me that he was now the MMIP coordinator and that we had this project to look forward to, it was kind of an honor to get back in there and work with him once again. He used to be our resident FBI agent many years ago. So thank you for assisting our tribes with this incredible opportunity to help protect our tribal people, not only here locally, but nationally as well. So thank you, Joel. You could stay standing if you want. So bear with me. but I think this is something that needs to be addressed. Second, I would like to take a moment to go through and recognize our Sioux Tribe members that worked on this project from beginning to end to right here to where we are today. So this might take a little bit, but I think that it is worth acknowledging everyone. And you can please stand up because I don't like to be standing up here alone. So first, Chairperson Aaron Paymont, Executive Director Christine McPherson, our Director of Strategic Planning, Larry Jocks, he's somewhere back out here. Our Planning Specialist, Cheryl Bernier, our now retired Detective Sergeant Mike Pins, who is now the Executive Director of the Gaming Commission. He's here somewhere. James McLeod, he is now our new Detective Sergeant at Sioux Tribe Law Enforcement. Mark Escada, he's our Assistant Tribal Prosecutor. Adriana Gunderson, Victim Witness Coordinator. Jennifer Dale Burton, our Communications Editor. Sherry Lucas, our Communications Administrative Secretary. Rick Smith, Communications Reporter. Melissa Van Leuven, she's the Child Placement Program Director for ACFS. Jennifer McCurchie, she's Grant Coordinator, Assistant Manager with the Advocacy Resource Center. Jamie Moran, one of my favorite people in the whole world. She's the Program Director for the Advocacy Resource Center, very passionate about it. Ashley Gravel, our Cultural Healing Educator from the Advocacy Resource Center. Jessica Jalot King, she's our Community Educator for the Advocacy Resource Center. Mr. Joshua Byron, he's a Cultural Activities Coordinator with the Cultural Department. Rachel Carr, the Executive Director of the United Three Fires Against Violence. Hallie McKelvey, Community Outreach Specialist with Uniting Three Fires Against Violence. And I see several of our board members here. I got to give you guys a big thank you as well for your continued support with this project and allowing us to proceed with it. So thank you. I'm sure there's many people behind the scenes. I know that I locally at my office, I always have Lana Stewart helping and making sure that my grammatics are correct and the things coming out of my office are up to par. So to all those behind the scenes, thank you as well. Now I would also, I guess, last but not least, I would also like to recognize our law enforcement, local, state, federal, and tribal counterparts. I see a bunch over there. If everybody could please stand up. Come on, John, I see you over there. Don't make me say the names. Anybody in our law enforcement, our counterparts. As we know in law enforcement, crimes know no jurisdictional boundaries. They really don't. So thank you guys for being here today in support of this initiative. It is with these partnerships and collaboration that we can make a difference. So thank you for being here and supporting of this. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ron Carrick. I am the Chief of Police for the Bay Mills Indian community. I've been in law enforcement almost 30 years now. Worked with several different agencies during my career, and I was able to come back home to Bay Mills as the Chief of Police about 3.5 years ago. When Joe Postman first reached out to me about this project, I was very honored that he would ask Bob and myself. At least I know he didn't hold a grudge for all the times I beat him in basketball in high school way back in the 1980s. So I also want to thank Mr. Burge's office for his full support and allowing Joel to work on this project with us. I am proud to say that yesterday, our Bay Mills Executive Council officially passed our plan yesterday. So I want to thank council members Rachel Burt, Gail Gleason, Brenda Bjork, Bev Carrick, and Whitney Gravel as our chairperson. So we're pretty excited about that. So while our goal is to never have to use this plan, but we all know that that's not going to be possible. Since I've been here for 3.5 years, we had investigated 2 missing person complaints from our reservation or involving our reservation. And luckily, both of them turned out to be good. The people were found recovered not recovered, but found safe and sound. So, but looking back with how we're doing it now, there's a lot of things we could have done, I could have done differently during them cases. So we are grateful to serve not only the Bay Mills community with this action plan, but to work with local law enforcement, state law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and other tribes around the nation, that they can utilize our plan and Sioux Tribe's plan to create their own plans. I know a lot of tribes around the country have a lot more of this going on than we do locally, but if our plans can work and help them, I am happy for that. And I do want to also recognize our team members out of Bay Mills that actually were the teams that were put together to put the plan together. First is Whitney Gravel, our tribal chairperson. Officer Amanda Nemeth with the Bay Mills Police Department. Victim services worker Liza, okay, I'm sorry, but Magaki. Our traditional worker through our tribal court, Jeanette White. Our Journey to Healing workers, Aneen Stallman and Mariah Teeple. Our Healing the Wellness Court and Probation Officer, Helen Wilkins. Victim Services Supervisor, Renee Wyzorek. Joy Parrish, who works on our Bay Mills Human Resources, and she's in charge of the safety of the tribe. Our Mental Health Supervisor at the Bay Mills Health Center, Renee Johnson. Paula Carrick from our History Department. Our Director of the Boys and Girls Club, Sandy Walden. Our Media Director for Bay Mills, Shannon Jones. Our Bay Mills Prosecutor, Ms. Jen Albrighter, who also want to give out a special thanks to Jen on this matter. Once we got all our 4 group plans together, she was really instrumental on putting together the final look of the plan. So thank you, Jen. And then myself. So again, I want to thank everybody for coming to this. I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends at the Native American Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. I was able to share the live link to a coworker, or my stepdaughter who works at the thing, and she shared it with a bunch of coworkers, so I know they're watching this live. So thank you for watching, everybody.
So the format's going to be, we're going to go back and forth between Sioux Tribe and Bay Mills. So for our mission statement for Sioux Tribe, the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians will utilize the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Tribal Community Response Plan to ensure a comprehensive and collaborative response to all reports of missing and murdered individuals, while operating within the victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally honoring multidisciplinary team approach.
The Tribal Community Response Plan, TCRP, for missing persons cases provides guides tailored to the specific needs, resources, and culture of the Ganuja Kani, place of the pipe, or the Bay Mills Indian community, be utilized when responding to missing and murdered persons. Both Sioux Tribe and Bay Mills plans are split into these 4 areas: victim services, media, and public communication, law enforcement, and community outreach partnership. For Bay Mills Victim Services vision, we envision giving immediate family of missing or murdered Indigenous persons an understanding of the investigative process, resources, and emotional support during their time of need. They matter and their voices matter. Our mission statement is that we will provide a collaborative approach to ensuring families' needs are met with understanding, sensitivity, and trauma-centered care while keeping Native American culture.
So for Sioux Tribe, We highlighted what we wanted to, and it's to ensure the delivery of culturally honoring services, which are defined as having an understanding and respecting the family of the MMIP and the MMIP by being aware of their background, belief systems, family structure, history, language, and customs. To ensure the delivery of victim-centered services, which is defined as a systemic focus on the needs and concerns of victims. To ensure the compassionate and sensitive delivery of services in a non-judgmental manner, and recognize the following 3 priorities for the families of MMIP and the MMIP. The need for safety, need for information, and the need to be heard. To ensure the delivery of trauma-informed services, which is defined as having an understanding of the impact of victimization and working to reduce the impact of trauma during a law enforcement investigation, ensuring the following: communicating, listening, providing services, sharing information, and planning.
The media and public communications team will utilize public awareness tactics such as public service announcements, social media, public outreach, and training to bring awareness on the issue. Law enforcement will coordinate with the media and public communications teams to share information and create trust within the community, subject to the applicable court rules, orders, and law enforcement agency policies. Our plan details out the essential components of reporting, investigation, search, rescue, recovery, and seeking justice.
Sioux Tribe's media and public communication team mirrored those components and also focused on preventing MMIPs and the conditions that increase the risk and vulnerability through programs, outreach, training, and public awareness. Both plans and search portion utilize a team or joint information center to have a coordinated response. Sioux Tribe strategy is work with a lead agency investigating the missing person case, which may be a multi-agency coordinated effort, and if appropriate, engage the public in efforts to search and locate, engage in tribal leaders and communicators early and throughout each stage to give input, and distribute information to the tribal community, identify resources deployed and steps taken in search, and when appropriate as per law enforcement guidance.
The Bay Mills Police Department will give cases involving a missing person high priority by responding to take the report, initiating a search if necessary, and quickly entering the information in the appropriate local, state, and NCIC law enforcement databases. This will also establish responsibilities regarding Bay Mills Police Department's response to reports of missing persons.
Our goals are to exhaust all available resources to reunite MMIPs and their families, to ensure the protection of Indigenous persons in Indian country, coordinate with tribal community response partners, and establish tracking and reporting systems for all MMIP cases. Our objectives are to reduce the missing Indigenous persons in Indian country, improve collaboration across all jurisdictions, identify and coordinate families' needs, and create a reporting system to track this data on missing Indigenous persons. Both Bay Mills and Sioux Tribe created their own checklists to ensure that every step of the process is followed through so that the response to a missing persons are effective, and we have done everything in our power to ensure the effective prosecution when necessary. This checklist, when we were in the initial stages of putting together our plan, at the time, Detective Sergeant Mike Pins, and I'm going to have him stand up right now because he was instrumental in putting this checklist together. And I always say we kind of put the horse or the cart before the horse, because when we sat down and started looking at this plan and what we were going to do to help our community, we out of the gate said, well, what are the boots on the ground? What's going to help us to make sure that we don't forget something, we don't overlook something, or we aren't providing the best services to those that we serve and protect. So I just want to give him special recognition because in his years of service, he sat down with his pen and paper and got to work and put this together. And I think this is going to be a template that will be used nationally. So thank you, Mike, for putting this together. I wanted to give you that recognition.
On a side note to what Bob just said, I also want to thank Mike Pinch for everything you did on this program. We worked together a lot through the years, and enjoy your new job, and thank you for your service. Our community outreach team will be readily available to help provide needed resources and support law enforcement, victim services, and the community. We will provide a collaborative approach in ensuring law enforcement, victim services, and community needs are met with understanding, sensitivity, and in a timely manner, while keeping Native American culture, values in mind.
Our community outreach partnerships will include both professional and community resources, assist law enforcement with collaborative and coordinated response efforts, address family and community needs. Both of our community response teams will have a diverse composition, including victims assistance, tribal, federal, state, local law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, family services, health and behavioral health services, cultural resources, communications, and community services, and volunteers.
Both Sioux Tribe and Bay Mills have made extensive list of contacts that will allow all partners to communicate quickly and efficiently.
Well, I have one more. If Larry gets me a picture up there, maybe. The photo on the screen was taken from a public release that was issued out onto social media Friday. This young man, his name is Owen, and he lives within our tribal communities in Kinross, Michigan. On Friday, May 21st, Owen went missing. Kinross Police Department pushed this information out onto social media, looking for information. Our detective, now Detective Sergeant James McLeod, reached out to Kinross PD's Chief Joe McColo to see how we could help. Now, although our MMIP plan is here, we're presenting it today and is not functioning per se and has not been implemented, Detective McLeod has been working with us on this, so he reached out knowing that we potentially could help. So we became involved with this case through Joe McColo. We started working with some of our federal partners, Jay Johnson with the FBI, HSI agent Todd Wilton, and we were able to track Owen back to Tennessee, where he had been taken. So this situation had the best outcome, in a large part due to our partnerships and collaborations we have in place. It's a horrible thing, but it had a great outcome, and I think this is the majority of the reason why we had that outcome. That checklist was instrumental to go through and say, all right, what have we done? Where are you at? How can we help? So, thank you. He's back home safe with his family today.
Next, we'd like to call again on Jeanette White and Cecil Pavlot, but I'm not seeing him here. Are you here, Cecil? Oh, there you are. To do a prayer and another drum song to send us off in a good way as we get ready to end our event here in the launching of our community tribal action response plans on missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. So Jeanette and Cecil. Chimigwich, Cecil, and Jeanette for that prayer and song. This concludes our Missing and Murdered Indigenous Person Tribal Community Response Plan ceremony. And we would like to just say Chimigwich again today, not only for our law enforcement officers, our victim services coordinators, our media communication specialists, or our representatives here and online. I know we also have our Unit 4 reps from the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe, Denise Chase, Darcy Morrow, Mayor Don Jerry, as well as Jay Gage from Senator Sabino's office joining us. A lot of the things we talked about today are difficult. They root themselves inside. They can knock us down. But one of my favorite quotes is really, that we lift as we climb. And I truly believe that's something that we were able to accomplish here today, that we will lift each other up. We will lift up our women, our children, our men, our people, our Two-Spirit, our Quewog, as we climb to a place where there is no longer any violence within our communities or any violence inflicted on our people as we live out our lives as Anishinaabe people. So with all of that, thank you so much, Chimigwich, for joining us. There's going to be a lunch offered here shortly after, and we appreciate everyone being here today. Chimigwich. We will also be removing the shawls performed earlier from the shawl ceremony and just ask for a moment of silence as they take these shawls and who they represent and those spirits that are with them and retire them after today's event. Thank you.